Alright, before we proceed any further, I think it would be good to do a little bit more color correction, just to flesh out the idea slightly more. So I think first of all, let's create a curves layer, and let's darken everything slightly, maybe by this much. Alright, and I think let's lower the opacity maybe to 2/3. And let's just go into our mask and gently delete a little bit of this from the shadows that are already quite dark. So let's just pick a big round brush and at maybe 50% start erasing a little bit of this. Just to make sure we're still catching bits of light where we want them, so our shadows don't go too dark. Okay, maybe a little bit here as well. Just getting that extra little bit of control over where the general light is in the image, because we want the viewers to be able to pretty much instantly focus on the important parts of the image. So let's have a look. Can probably erase more here. So here, for example, we can just erase it a little bit to draw a tiny bit of attention to this ledge, maybe to this kind of path here. Let's have a look. Here we can erase a little bit as well. Alright. And let's make another curves. And maybe let's make this kind of brighter. So let's set the opacity to maybe 3/4. And let's instead invert this. And let's just broadly paint in some more light. Kind of where we want it. Alright, so now what we're getting is in the shadows, the light is much more subdued. And I know we have a lighting render from Clarice, but there's no reason why we can't enhance that effect in Photoshop somewhat. So this just gives us a little bit more control to selectively kind of decide where we want the attention in this image to go. Maybe a little bit more light here to make it look like there's maybe an opening here in the rooftop. Okay, so I've applied these two beneath the haze because I only wanted them to apply to the textures and whatnot. However, I'll make a couple of more curves layers And this one, I think I'll maybe raise the shadows a little bit, because they were a little bit too dark. If you look at photos, you rarely get shadows that are perfectly crisp and dark, especially in environments where there's this much water in the air and fog. You just kind of get a little bit of a hazed look in the shadows. So maybe let's just make sure this doesn't apply to any of the highlights. Okay, so now our shadows are a little bit less contrasty, a little bit less saturated than our highlights due to these curves layers that we've added. Let's maybe also just do another one. Actually, first, maybe here, let's drop the opacity again to a couple of thirds. Okay. And in this one, let's just raise it up slightly and let's make the whole mask black. And let's just select the round brush. And let's just paint some extra light to further sort of blow out these shadows. So in combination, all of these curves layers have kind of made it so that the shadows are brighter, but there's less contrast within them. Maybe let's try to erase some from this light bit. Okay. Okay, let's do something a little bit more loose and fun. Let's go to above our fog layers. And let's create a new layer. And we'll just select a round brush. And yeah, let's just go for a round one. And let's zoom in a little bit. And let's paint some cables. Maybe make this brush even smaller. And let's just have a look. Okay, so here we want to be really loose. Just drawing quick gestures with our pen to kind of create natural looking wires that are draped on or from these objects and leading to other objects. And I'm just using the color picker with the sample set to current and below. So when I click Alt, I get my color picker, and I'm just selecting a nearby color and doing a line. And this is a little bit hit and miss, I find, as I'm not a very accurate painter of these wires, but we can adjust them slightly when needed. So, like that. Let's do another one here. Okay. Maybe one more like so. Don't want to overdo it, but what I'm trying to do here is maybe have these lines or these cables go in such a way where they kind of lead the eye around the image. So here I'm kind of maybe hoping to block off this part of the image slightly, so that when the eye travels like this, it kind of travels in this arc, because there are lines here that lead the eye in that way. And then here we could lead it like so to there. and I end up doing 1,000 strokes before I get one that I'm happy with, but it usually works. Let's maybe put some here. Select this and slightly skew it that way, so that it looks like it's going off into the distance. And okay, maybe let's add a couple of cables here. Some here maybe. Just a little bit of visual noise to break apart all of these straight lines. So it's quite nice to have some curved lines as well. And whenever I have the line reaching from some foreground object that is very dark to a background object that is much lighter, I can just select whatever is in the layer by alt-clicking on the image here, and then color pick from your further bit and just paint in some of that color to create a transition. And I'm doing this above all of my haze layers, because if I do it below, then the haze will go on top and obscure the wires, and they're not going to look great. So this is a slightly better method. It's not perfectly clean, and I wish there was a better way, but this has to do for now. Actually, maybe those are too thick. Kind of want these to be believable rope thickness. Couple there. Maybe one leading all the way like that. And again, let's select this by control clicking the layer and just color picking a bit of this color and painting it in. Cool. Let's make some lines here. Okay. Let's add another one going like this. So maybe it goes from there to there, and let's merge it down. And now again, or you know what I could do, I could make a new layer, parent it down, and select a big round brush, and select some bright color from the image, maybe this. And now if I softly paint over this, because this cable is going over the shadow, I can draw a little bit of highlight there and it'll stand out against the shadow. So that's pretty cool to do. It doesn't really apply too much anywhere else here. The rest are going over highlights. But basically what I'm doing here is where the shadows or where the cables are going over bright parts, I just have them in shadow to stand out that way. And here where the cable is going over a shadowy part, I make it a little bit brighter to help it stand out there. So your brain takes this line that's going dark in front of light, and then this line that is going light in front of dark, and just of course combines them into one line. So it kind of works in that way. Let's merge these layers and I'll just call it cables. And I think we could add a little bit of extra life to them. So I've got some images of vines or plants. So let's just copy this whole thing and paste it into our image. And what we can do is, let's zoom in a bit more. It's a small image. We'll just go to blending options and we'll key out the highlights. Maybe to this extent. And let's create an empty layer underneath and select our plant and merge it down. So now we have it masked. And let's shrink it down some more. Okay. So I'm just gonna maybe add this hanging on my wires or my cables. So let me just go into curves and bring down the brightness a bit. Okay. Let's make this a bit smaller. Maybe copy it a few times. Maybe we could actually do another cable here. This is more difficult at close distance than from further away. Yeah, maybe another here. Okay. Let's go back to our plant. We could hang it up here maybe. Let's shrink it down a bit. And we could use the burn tool to just make it a bit darker as well. Maybe shrink it like this here. And put it there. Let's make another copy. And we'll bring this here maybe. And let's just make this darker as well. And let's merge all these. Maybe I'll take one of these others. Let's go with this one. I'm just very roughly adding some life here. Of course, we can spend more time cutting these out and making everything look pretty, but I'm just trying to think of the fastest way to create a nice image. And I know where we can cut some corners, so I don't think anyone is going to be paying too much attention to these. They're just here for extra detail. So let's make this darker. Actually, let's use curves instead. And let's just bring down the highlights and bring up the shadows a little bit like this. So we make it slightly less contrasty. Shrink it slightly. Then here I can copy it again maybe. Put it in this corner. Make it a bit darker. I'll call this hanging lines. Alright, that'll do. Okay, next I want to add some birds. Just to add some extra movement and scale to the image. So here I've got an image of some bird cutouts. And I'm just going to copy the whole thing and paste it here. And let's move this to a slightly better position here. And okay, I think I'll make a copy of this before I do anything, just so I can reuse it. But this one image should be enough for all of the birds I want to add to the image. I just gotta try to be a little bit considerate of scale, so maybe let's make all of these slightly smaller to begin with. And let's just start spacing these out. Just pretty quickly. You kind of constantly try to not make the spacing of these look too random, because that becomes noticeable in and of itself. But at the same time, you don't want them to be too organized, because you want a little bit of freedom in your image. So I'm kind of trying to think of birds in the real world like seagulls and whatnot, where there are spots in the city, if it's near the coast, where there are just loads and loads of seagulls all at once. So I'm just kind of trying to create similar sorts of hubs for all of these birds. So it kind of seems like they are flying all together around the same place. Maybe one here. Okay. These two are kind of stuck together. Let's just delete them. Let's get the other layer and let's copy this again. And I think these I'll want to make completely tiny and have them be a bit further away. So maybe they're more around this area. And let's space them out a little bit. let's just erase that a little bit. Okay. And once more. Let's take these and put them in one by one, because this is a little bit closer. Actually, let's make this one smaller. Place it there. So I'm kind of looking at which of these have the bright underbellies, which are yellow. So those I'm trying to place more against the shadow, and then the ones where we see them from the top, where it's just their dark wings, those I try to place against the light. So here, this stands out, but if I move it here, it doesn't stand out. Whereas this stands out here. Actually, this stands out everywhere. It's pretty noticeable, but you get the gist of it. So let's make this a little bit smaller. And also, it's always interesting to kind of put these little details where something in the background intersects. So this is kind of in this crosshairs between the line in the background of the waterfall and the wings. So it's also like a nice little trick to make things slightly more noticeable. Let's flip this and put it here as well. Let's put a larger one here somewhere. Okay, and these small ones we can put somewhere in the background here. Maybe not that small. Okay, let's delete what's left in the middle of these. And let's merge these together so all the birds are in one. And let's make a new layer underneath and parent this down. And let's just select a big round brush. And actually, before we parent this down, because once you parent something down, you cannot select colors if you have, I believe, current and below set here. So you gotta pick your color without this parented. And let's just pick a sort of bluish white background color, and let's parent this down. And let's softly paint in a little bit of this haze over the birds. Not all of them, just the ones that are further in the distance. For example, here on the left, the black levels of the birds more or less match the black levels of the buildings, so quite dark. Whereas here in the background, we gotta haze them out a little bit. And here as well, because they're sort of flying around a waterfall, so there would be a lot of foam. Not foam, just spray of water, which would make them be more hazed out as well. Okay, so let's just merge that down, and we'll call this birds. And this will be enough for this lesson. In the next one, we're gonna look at more overpainting tricks in Photoshop.